Welcome to Politics Watch. You're about to see highlights from the PNP Covenant held at the Manchester High School on Thursday, November 29th, part 3 of 3.
I think what we are committed to is the exchange of the ideas and the discussion of what we plan to do. But we can do some market research and determine whether there's something more user-friendly which will resonate more with the population. The housing, the land thing, I think, is critical, particularly in rural areas. But yes, housing is as important. And I would say, certainly for urban MP, housing certainly trumps land. But in many cases, they are connected. But I take the point, again, I think about where emphasis should be. I don't know whether universally housing is more important than land. It varies because, again, rural areas may have more emphasis on the land. But I take the point you make. And then the fundamental point about where the emphasis should be. The first in family, I wouldn't say, in a sense, it might be aspirational for a lot of people in the sense that you want to encourage people to aspire to it. But I wouldn't say you necessarily have to replace it, but I think you have to place emphasis on how you treat that group, that cohort. You spoke about the women, but you equally know the men are worse than the women. And those are the ones who end up being the gunmen of tomorrow. So how we tackle that grouping of, they end up being called unattached youth. I'd spoken about it in the beginning where we have people who have 14, 15 years of formal education in state-run institutions and have no skills that allow them to operate in the real world. And that's the majority of them, you know, and it stems from the deficiencies at basic, which go through to primary, and then you send them to high schools. The ones who do CSEC, because the schools don't make the dunce on them, sorry, I'm just using a term, but the schools prevent those who they know can't pass from doing it, because they don't want to drag down the average, from participating. So you already have the ones who are doing CSEC being a percentage of the total number. So what we are, and again, it may be emphasis, but we are focused on ensuring that we put resources in basic and primary so that people can have a proper foundation for high school. But how you market it, I accept is something that we can look at as well.
Comrade McNamee.
Because, and I made my comment on Facebook about it, and I was also speaking to just before comment on it. I don't think it resonates. It doesn't say when I see roll out covenant, I don't know what I see. It doesn't bring anything to me. I like the term though at Jamaica that works for us. Because I think that counteracts the prosperity thing that is so-called happening now. Because it's the prosperity for some, but at Jamaica that works for all. I think that sends a stronger message. Another thing is that an old returning officer told me that PNP has never lost an election in Jamaica. JLP has never won an election. The only thing that happens is that PNP won't vote. So by default, JLP take over government. Right now, and if you look at the numbers, when I analyze the numbers myself, I'm seeing that JP take over government by default because PNP just don't vote. Right now, there's not much energy in the PNP camp on the ground. What the PNP has going for it now is that Damian Crawford, which if you whether you like it, or no, is that Damian Crawford. I was at a function and there were quite a number of young people and they were all on their cell phones. When Damian stood up to talk, all of those young people put their phones aside and they were eating from his home. He has this thing about him that he connects. And when he connects, he maintains. And I think that he's being underutilized now. We need to plan a strategy how to get him out to the grassroots, to mobilize, to motivate. Because see, after the election the other day, it's like it was a sweep. And a breath of energy came into the party. But it is sort of probably dying back down now. So we need to maintain that energy and use the young man, or else we will have to migrate from Jamaica because almost 4 years now and it's like I'm suffocating on the jail. I cannot remain in a country with jail is ruling. And we have what it takes to win the next election if we win.
Good night.
What I've noticed is that the population in Jamaica, 50% of this population is under 35 years old. So what the Jamaica Labour Party is doing that we are unfortunately not doing we use social media on a daily basis. We do use social media, but it's mostly Facebook and a lot of persons, especially my people, don't use Facebook anymore. Mostly Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, and stuff like that. Damian Crawford, TikTok, and quite a few other youngsters in the game to utilize these platforms so that it's easier for us to relate to them. So a lot of persons since the night has transpired are saying when we get back in school we should do this and that. But it will not happen. It will not happen if we don't start from now. Because if we don't use these platforms, that's not going to happen. Because what the Jamaica Labour Party are doing is using their social media platforms even when they're not doing effective work or their work is inferior or they are using on social media to broadcast what they're doing, which means that it's a lot of work. So a lot of youngsters turn to the Jamaica Labour Party because of their good response on social media and how active they use it.
Excellent.
Let me just deal with the last one first. We are on those platforms, probably with the exception of Snapchat. The issue is maybe we are not connecting, but we are on. We have recognized that we have to internally make some changes in terms of our communications apparatus, and there's a commitment to doing that, and some changes will be seen early in the new year to ensure that not just the social media, but because you have to play in both spaces. You do have the under 30s who are primarily in social media. You have older persons who use traditional media. So we have to play in both spaces. And we're committed to making the changes so we can be effective. But we are there. We on a daily basis, we are on all the platforms. The principal who spoke about Damian has some specific responsibilities in addition to Region 3 politically. He has been assigned, each vice president has been given some areas, including youth, entertainment, which he has direct responsibility for. He does play a role. He was at a number of similar type meetings, one in Montego Bay, one in St. Mary. So he has been going out, and he is being utilized in a number of these ways. What we're trying to do is to ensure, I take the point about energy or lack thereof. The sessions we are having here are to at least give our own supporters an idea of what we are about and what we plan to do. So at least you can speak about it when you are speaking to persons who might say to you, well, what is the PNP going to do differently? In addition, we're trying to ensure that at the constituency level, that the leadership, because the leadership of constituencies have to take the lead in ensuring that you mobilize within those constituencies. So there's a commitment to that as well. Again, I take the point about covenant, and it's something we look at in terms of the wording to ensure that we are connecting with the market.
Comrade Brad.
I have a concern as well as I have some pointers. My concern, you mentioned that we will have, well, you're trying to implement state-funded healthcare that will focus. All right, you mentioned that you are planning to have state-funded health services for certain groups, but I believe that a vast majority of persons will be excluded from that group. You mentioned children, the elderly, disabled, and the indigents, right? But there's a group of professionals that we have healthcare that is not necessarily adequate. And to focus on just one section of the country, the population, you're leaving out a vast majority of persons. Even though we're employed, that doesn't translate to us having quality healthcare. My second concern, someone mentioned about the NIS, NHD contributions. It was said that you wait a long time for it to be granted. My first concern is, you mentioned that you do enforcement for the companies to pay over, but I also believe that an area that is of concern is the actual agency, where a lot of the information, it's not properly stored. NIS, NHD, you'll have persons requesting information for 30, 40 years of service, sometime dated back to 1960s, and the institution, NHD or NIS, requests that information. It takes a lot of manpower to go through 30, 40 years records that contribute to the lengthy wait time. And I don't think the information is requested for comparison. I think it's more, they're using the companies as a source for that information. Granted that these would have been paid over. Yes. Well, I've encountered a lot of letters where it was paid over. However, the NIS, the NHD, doesn't have the record. And then you spend a lot of time trying to find 30, 40 years of data, which they should have had in the first place. My second concern, oh, this is probably my fourth concern. This is probably my fourth concern. You mentioned that the PEP is, the implementation is a disaster. However, I think that in areas like education, health security, we need to have collaborative efforts where when one party starts one thing, we have to try to support it. The areas, no, all right, hear me out. The area that it merits, that has merits, support it. The area that requires some work or can be eliminated, those can be pointed out and those can be eliminated. Like, I think this idea of enforcing critical thinking in students at such a young age is very important. And I believe that this is something that PEP is trying to encourage. And yes, I agree that the implementation is not a smooth transition. I wouldn't use the word disaster. It's kind of a strong word to just say it's a disaster. It's like when I hear that it's a disaster, it's like you're saying you're not supporting it. That's what it translates to me as.
The PEP was conceived by the People's National Party, and the work on it started under us. So we are supportive of moving away from what was a rote system of the SWOT and reproduce to something which encourages critical thinking. So let's establish that. Now, the implementation of it, and the government was warned, given pointers, the opposition indicated the concerns that existed about how it should proceed with implementation. They have chosen a path which has led to, at best, a poor implementation of it. Now, we have a responsibility to highlight it. We are not the only ones. The JTA has been very strident in terms of other groups, parents, many groups. I mean, I must tell you, I don't know what's going to happen this year in terms of placing students, because the results are going to be so poor that I don't know how the basis on which they're going to use to place students. So we are supportive of introducing critical thinking, because it's the same issue we raised about producing students who can compete in the world that exists right now. But we can't support something that is poorly done and which wasn't well thought out in terms of implementation. And that is where we have been critical of the government, and we're going to continue to be. And we're not just being critical, we have made recommendations and suggestions as well. So it's not that we are against it at all. You want? All right, let me just, you finish, or you, oh, you have one more, okay. All right.
Or sixth. All right, I heard your plan to have one person per household, the first person from each household who qualifies for matriculation to a university, the opportunity to get a fully paid scholarship. I think, though, that enforcement with regards to collections at the Student Loan Bureau would allow us to have a great amount of persons accessing tertiary institutions, where you're able to collect from those who already benefited from the service, and you're now able to redistribute that which was collected to other persons who need it. You have having a tertiary education doesn't translate to having a job, and it doesn't translate to having a meaningful job either. You realize that nowadays you'll have students who probably did marketing in school and end up doing something that's not related to marketing. It doesn't necessarily translate to having a job. So some families may have persons who have graduated from a tertiary institution, but the main breadwinners in that family are still unable to provide access to tertiary institution for the children for that family. Yes, it's a good idea to give scholarship to one person. It's good encouragement, but the Student Loan Bureau can provide for a greater majority of persons in the population.
Thank you. Let me address the last point. There have been better efforts at collecting and naming and shaming people and publishing the picture in the paper so that people comply. I would tell you, though, from my own interactions with students, the bigger issue is that many of them are not in a position to repay, because as you correctly pointed out, the jobs they get, I mean, I was on campus twice last week, and the big complaint is, boy, we do a degree and his call center work we're going to get at $40,000 or $50,000 a month. And so first thing is, many of them don't get jobs, and then the kind of jobs they get after they have to deal with transportation, food, accommodation, they really have nothing to pay back. Now, you do have a set of people who just believe that because this government lend them money, them can just not pay it back. And I think student loan has made more and more efforts to try and tackle that group. But trust me, a large percentage of the difficulty is genuine persons who can't afford to pay it back based on their job situation. It's not unusual for persons to study a particular discipline and don't get a job in that particular discipline. It's not unique to Jamaica at all. In fact, many students will tell you that even after them do them first degree, them don't really know what they want to do. I mean, I am an example of that. Some people very early in life know clearly what they want to do, but many don't. So some people, I mean, that's in a sense a benefit of the US tertiary system, where you do kind of liberal arts degree and you try to figure out what you want to do, whereas the English system forces you to kind of make a choice earlier on. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with getting a job in an area outside of your particular discipline, certainly if you haven't decided what you want to do. You raise a point about the persons who have insurance and are professionals but wouldn't be covered. I take the point. Again, you have to make choices. In an ideal world, if you had all the resources, you could provide fully funded healthcare for everybody. But I don't know if that would be equitable. And I want to just challenge you to think about it. Is it equitable for me with 2 healthcare cards, one that I use on my own from Sagicor and one that as a member of parliament I contribute through? Is it equitable for me to have the same access to state for healthcare as it is for my helper or my gardener? I would say to you it is not equitable. Because I have a choice. I can go to a private doctor with my health card and get good service with my health card. So in an environment where you have limited resources, you have to make choices about trying to impact positively those who can least help themselves. And what I would say to you, I would accept that those with healthcare cards, it don't mean that you can get the best healthcare in the world, but you certainly start with an advantage over the many. And trust me, there are many, many who have no option but to go to the healthcare system. And I mean, sad to tell you, there are just so many people who I know who die in the healthcare system just because of a lack of care. Meaning if they had the option of going to a private doctor, they could probably live, but they don't. So you have to put, when you're formulating policy, try and impact those who are least able to help themselves the most. So it doesn't mean we don't care about those who may have health insurance, but with the resources you have to try and impact that. The questions about how we market the covenant, I've taken them on board, and it's something that we will look at. The covenant is not exhaustive in terms of like a manifesto, so there are very specific areas that we didn't touch. So like you mentioned, ensuring that technology is infused in a number of the industries, that's something that we're committed to. Work we started, that's the area I worked in when we were last in government, and certainly committed to. But again, how we present the big ticket items, we were trying to present the things that we felt would catch the majority of the Jamaican people. So some of the items, not that we're not going to deal with them, but they wouldn't necessarily be considered in the big ticket ones. I just want to say, it hasn't been asked, but I just want to provide a little update on, Hopeton asked me to, on NIDS. Because I know it's a big issue for a number of people. We decided to, as a party, take the government to court over NIDS. And I want to give the background and tell you how we got to this point. Again, the work on NIDS is something which started a very long time ago, and we are supportive of a national ID system. So let's start there. We are supportive. The issues we had, and we still do with NIDS, is the specific legislation and what the legislation entails. So for example, in the legislation, if you don't have your NIDS card, you can be denied access to certain public services, like healthcare, as an example. So you could go to a hospital as a pregnant woman, you forget your NIDS card at home, and the person say, because you don't have your NIDS card, I'm not going to treat you. Now, that's what the law states. Now, we have an issue with that, because we believe you have a constitutional right to access to healthcare and other services. That's one. Secondly, we had an issue with the amount of data that is being asked of individuals to provide. Your fingerprint, your toe print, your iris scan, your vein pattern, your husband, your income, your this, your that. We don't believe that, one, all of that information is necessary. Secondly, in this day and age with the challenges of cybersecurity, to protect that level of data is going to be challenging. The companies with resources that would be more than us as a country suffer from hacks and cyber attacks. So why would you need all of that information for somebody to have an ID? Third, the legislation discriminates against Jamaicans. So let's say a foreigner came here and wanted to buy property. He could buy property without anything. You in Jamaica, if you wanted to do the same, you would have to have your needs. Should a foreigner have preference over you simply because you are required to have this ID? Fourth, while the issue of needs being compulsory may not be an issue, but the fact that you are penalized and criminalized if you opt not to have it, we also believe is a problem. So if you opt out of needs, there's a fine, and if you don't pay the fine, there are further penalties. We don't think that should be so. Estonia, which is used as the example by this government, they incentivize persons to use their card. So they provide discounts for persons on the bus and the train if you have the needs, and then private companies come on board and they also provide discounts. So it suits you to use the card, not that you're penalizing somebody for using the card. So when NIDS was being passed, we said to the government, refer it to a joint select committee of parliament so that persons would get an opportunity to raise the concerns, bring recommendations, etc. The government said no. They had a loan from the IDB, which they felt they had a specific time frame on, and so they rushed it through. The legislation had over 264 amendments. 264 amendments. And then it was passed. And we felt that we had a responsibility on behalf of the Jamaican people to take them to court on some constitutional matters where we believe the current legislation breaches the Constitution of Jamaica. And the matter was heard last month in October. The Chief Justice has said a maximum of 6 months for a ruling. Hopefully we'll get it earlier. And our hope is that the specific areas in the legislation that we raise as being unconstitutional, the court will rule in our favor, and then the government will be forced to amend those things and come back with a NIDS bill which protects the constitutional rights of all Jamaicans. So I just wanted to provide you, again, with a perspective on that. We are not against an ID system. The objective of NIDS changes by the day, depends on which minister you hear. Some people say it's crime fighting, some people say is other different things. It seems to be a catch-all to solve every problem that existed in the country up to now. So.
All right, 2 final questions. Young comrade from Bel Air.
Good night, everyone. Pertaining to education, I believe that there is huge underemployment in Jamaica. Now, my cousin went to UTech and graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Information Technology. So, now my cousin was looking for a job for like 2 years. He was looking for a job until finally he got a work at a call center. But he's qualified to do computer stuff like writing programs, right? And he was working in Mobay. So also, there's underemployment and the work atmosphere. So he had to leave the job in Mobay because of the gangsters, right? So they were coming to him and extorting him. So now my cousin has now left the country and is now working in the US, right? So I believe that we need to do something about, not really brain drain, but start at the school system. We need to inform the youths about financial education because we need more jobs. We need to be the ones that create the jobs for ourselves. We need more entrepreneurship, right? We need to learn more about stocks. We need to learn more about taxes. I had to read for myself to learn about taxes and stuff like that. I had to learn about which type of job is the most taxed, right? I had to learn about trading stocks, stuff like that, which is a very good way to make money without scamming. Trading stocks, you can make up to $1,000 a day if you have the capital, if you have the mindset, a plan, a strategy. Right. Also, we need more innovative youths. We need to get into the mind of our youths and try and get them to see a vision, not just the mentality of the world, which is to get a job, a family, and then work, and then no dreams, nothing. We need dreams, people who are dreamers, visionary. We need visionary people, right? All right, that's all.
All right. Yeah, last question, Comrade Anthony.
Julian Robinson, General Secretary, People's National Party. We had a consultation on the rollout of our covenant, where we met with residents in central Manchester to discuss the ideas that the People's National Party intends to put forward for the next election. I did a presentation on the main components of the covenant, and then we had what I would regard as a very good discussion after. This is part of a process where we're going to be engaging residents across the country, island-wide, in this exercise to get feedback on what our ideas are and to make that form what would be considered a manifesto for the election when it comes. But we are engaging both within the party and outside the party on the ideas that we have to uplift the Jamaican people.